Imagine waking up to headlines saying, the Supreme Court just issued a 9-0 decision that changes everything for gun owners across America. A ruling so strong, so unanimous, that even the justices who often disagree stood shoulder to shoulder on this one. This isn't just another minor court update. This is a major Second Amendment shockwave spreading nationwide with real implications for millions of law-abiding gun owners, states, and even the federal agencies that have been trying to push the limits of firearm regulation. So, today we're breaking down exactly what the court decided, why it matters, and how this unanimous ruling could reshape future Second Amendment cases and challenges already moving through lower courts right now. Before we jump into all of that, if you want to support the channel and stay informed on every major legal update affecting your rights, make sure you're subscribed. Also, double-check to make sure YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. They love doing that, especially on channels like this that talk about the Constitution and the Second Amendment. Now, let's get right into it. The Supreme Court's 9-0 ruling came as a complete surprise to many. In a time when almost every major case splits along ideological lines, to have all 9 justices agree sends a very clear message. The law and the Constitution still matter more than political preferences. The case at the center of this shock decision was Garland versus Cargo, often referred to as the bump stock case. But what the court decided goes far beyond bump stocks. It directly challenges how far the federal government, particularly agencies like the ATF, can stretch the definitions of gun laws to criminalize behavior that Congress never actually outlawed. In this ruling, the court effectively said enough is enough. The ATF doesn't get to rewrite laws passed by Congress. The court made it clear only Congress makes laws, and federal agencies can't change definitions on their own just to push an agenda. Now let's rewind a bit to understand how we got here. Back in 2018, after the Las Vegas tragedy, the ATF issued a new rule redefining what counts as a machine gun. Traditionally, under federal law, a machine gun is a weapon that fires more than one round per trigger pull. But the ATF decided to expand that definition to include bump stocks, devices that allow faster firing, but still require one trigger pull per round. Gun owners argued this was an unconstitutional overreach, that the ATF was inventing new laws out of thin air. Multiple lawsuits were filed, and over the years, the cases moved through the lower courts with mixed results. Some courts sided with the government, others didn't. But when the Supreme Court took up the case, few expected what happened next. Not only did the court reject the ATF's rule, they did it unanimously. That's right, even the liberal justices agreed that the ATF had gone too far. Justice Gorsuch, writing for the court, pointed out that if Congress wanted to ban bump stocks, they could have done so, but they didn't, and it's not the ATF's job to make up new criminal laws just because the political winds change. This decision wasn't just about bump stocks. It was about agency power, due process, and the limits of executive authority. What's even more important is what this means for current and future 2A battles. This unanimous ruling sets a powerful precedent. It limits how far the ATF or any federal agency can stretch interpretations of existing gun laws that directly impacts ongoing cases involving pistol braces, ghost guns, magazine bans, and even state-level restrictions that try to copy federal logic. For years, gun owners have been saying that the ATF has been acting like a lawmaking body instead of a law enforcement agency, writing new rules and interpretations that criminalize ordinary Americans overnight. This Supreme Court ruling says no more. And that's why so many legal experts are calling this one of the most important Second Amendment-related rulings in decades, not because it redefines the 2A directly, but because it reins in the very agencies that have been undermining it through regulatory overreach. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Even though this case focused on bump stocks, the language in this decision is already being cited in several other lawsuits, particularly Duncan versus Bont, the ongoing battle over California's magazine ban, and Mock versus Garland, which challenges the ATF's pistol brace rule. Attorneys in those cases are already pointing to this 9-0 ruling, saying, look, the Supreme Court just made it crystal clear that agencies can't twist definitions of firearms to criminalize millions of Americans. That means the legal dominoes are starting to fall. In California, Judge Roger Bonitez, often called Saint Bonitez by gun owners, has already cited similar logic in striking down the state's so-called large capacity magazine ban. Now, with this 9-0 Supreme Court ruling on the record, his reasoning gains even more strength on appeal. If the Ninth Circuit or even the Supreme Court reviews Duncan versus Bont again, they'll have to consider this new precedent. And that could mean a massive victory for millions of gun owners, not just in California, but across the country. Now let's talk about the broader political reaction. Almost immediately after this decision, the Department of Justice tried to downplay the impact, calling it a narrow ruling that doesn't affect other ATF policies. But the truth is that's spin, because the core of this decision strikes at the heart of the DOJ's and ATF's power structure. When the court unanimously says that agencies can't rewrite laws to fit their preferred policies, that sends a strong warning shot not just to the ATF, but to every agency that's been abusing rulemaking to bypass Congress. Gun rights groups like the Firearms Policy Coalition, FPC, and Gun Owners of America, GOA, immediately praised the ruling, saying it vindicates years of legal challenges and proves that the government cannot keep expanding its authority under the guise of safety. Even organizations outside the gun debate, civil liberties groups, legal scholars, and states' rights advocates have called this ruling a major victory for the separation of powers. And here's something most people missed. This ruling didn't just limit agency power, it also restored a legal doctrine known as the rule of lenity. That means if a criminal law is vague or unclear, the courts must interpret it in favor of the citizen, not the government. That's a massive shift because for years, agencies like the ATF have been using vague language to trap gun owners in gotcha violations. Now, the Supreme Court is saying that era is over. If Congress wants to make something illegal, they have to clearly say so. This single line of reasoning could protect countless Americans from arbitrary prosecutions and future reinterpretations of firearm laws. Now, what happens next? Well, in the short term, the ATF will likely have to formally rescind its bump stock rule. There are already federal courts issuing orders to vacate that regulation entirely, but the real ripple effects will play out in the coming months as lower courts apply this decision to other ongoing two-way cases. We could see the pistol brace rule already facing multiple injunctions permanently struck down. We could also see challenges to ghost gun restrictions and magazine bans gaining momentum as courts cite this ruling as the standard for limiting agency authority. And remember, this was a 9-0 ruling. That means even the most progressive justices agreed the government went too far. That's a level of unity we haven't seen in decades, especially on cases that touch the Second Amendment. So, when all 9 justices stand together and say the executive branch has crossed the line, you better believe it's a warning shot heard loud and clear in Washington. Now, some critics are already panicking, saying this decision could undermine gun safety laws, but that's simply not true. The court didn't strike down a safety regulation, it struck down bureaucratic overreach. If Congress wants to pass a law banning bump stocks, they can try. But that's a job for elected lawmakers, not unelected bureaucrats. That's how the system is supposed to work. This ruling restores that balance, reminding the government that the Constitution is still the supreme law of the land, not agency memos or executive orders. In conclusion, this 9-0 Supreme Court ruling is far more than a technical legal victory. It's a massive check on government power and a significant step toward protecting the rights of law-abiding citizens nationwide. It reinforces the fundamental idea that the government works for the people, not the other way around. And as more 2A cases continue to climb their way up the judicial ladder, this ruling will serve as the foundation, the legal anchor for future wins in defense of the Second Amendment. So stay tuned, because this is only the beginning. As these cases unfold, we're going to see whether this Supreme Court has the courage to keep that same energy when it comes to other critical 2A issues, from magazine bans to NFA restrictions and state-level overreach. But for now, this is a major victory, and it's proof that sometimes, even in divided times, the Supreme Court can still deliver a unanimous reminder that freedom, law, and accountability still matter. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like, comment, and share this video. It helps the channel reach more people. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss the next big legal update. This nation was built by armed citizens who valued freedom, and it will be maintained by those same values today. Stay informed, stay free, and as always, thank you for watching.